All right, so in for this one, we have the Athletics PSG writer Peter Rutzler and Pierre-Etienne Minonzio from L'Equipe as well. Right, Peter, let's talk about last night, right? 3-2, Barcelona winning at PSG. How big a blow is this for Paris Saint-Germain? Because we know the Champions League is definitely a trophy this team has coveted for quite a while.
Yeah, in the football sense, in terms of the tie, losing the home leg is a blow. PSG haven't overturned the first leg deficit in the Champions League before, and you could tell actually from Luis Enrique's comments after the game that he wasn't overly pleased with how the game panned out. I think there was a sense that, particularly with Barcelona's goals, they stemmed from individual mistakes, which were pretty avoidable. But I think actually in the context of the game, Barcelona were excellent. The way they set up, the way they shackled Kylian Mbappe, the way they went direct and sort of exposed some of the weaknesses in this early form of Luis Enrique's PSG project. But I think on a wider perception of PSG, of course, this year, all the talk from the club is about we don't have to win it this year. We don't have to do that, but it is the trophy that the owners, the club, have long sought since their takeover back in 2011. And I think once the draw came out for the quarterfinals and the semi-finals, and it just seemed to offer a bit more of a pathway, it avoided some of the heavyweights. That changes it. I think but rather than pressure, which we've become accustomed to, I know Pierre will talk more about this, but it was a lot more excitement, a bit more optimism about what might be possible with this team in this new direction and this new project. So yeah, there's definitely disappointment at losing the home leg. It's going to be difficult going to Barcelona to try and overturn that, but they have the players to do that. And I think we'll have to see whether this performance from Barcelona was an exception to a general rule or the start of something quite impressive for them.
Yeah, Pierre, I know you weren't at the game, but you are in Paris, and I'm just trying to get a sense of how the Parisians feel about this phase of the Champions League. Is it same old PSG in the Champions League? Thanks for your efforts, but it's not to be. Or is there a feeling or a bit more leniency to the project at hand?
No, I think that's exactly what you said. It's as a Smith song said, it's a same old story. It goes on, and it's always the same old story. I watched a game with my brother-in-law with the Parisian Ultra, and he cannot manage to get tickets, so he was totally in a fury in the end of the game because it's always the same kind of things that happen. You have players who are very good, who are making a good season, and who give the impression to collapse under pressure, And I give you a concrete example. Donnarumma is making his best season so far with PSG. He was very good, very confident. And yesterday he was awful. And he was exactly awful, like, for example, Buffon was awful on the second leg against Manchester United in 2019. Exactly in the same way, like Donnarumma was awful 2 years ago against Real. So suddenly you have a team that you do not recognize and who make stupid mistakes. So there is this idea that there is a kind of curse, Every time there is a huge Champions League game, and this team in some ways gives the impression to fall apart.
Do you think, though, Pierre, that they always say with the Champions League, it's half time now, right?
Yeah.
PSG do have the armor, the materials to go to Barcelona to get something. If they can unlock Kylian Mbappe, for instance.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely they can do it. At 2-2, I would have said 100% sure. But yeah, it's gonna be difficult, as you say, obviously, and I'm not making a big story here, but it will depend of the Mbappe form. There is something I've learned with Kylian Mbappe is that every time you say, okay, maybe he's not as good as we do think, or maybe he's not on the best time of his career, or maybe, I like him, but in the end of the day, he's not scoring on great game. Every time you do things that, he shut your mouth. Sorry to say it,
That's it, man.
like this. So he can make a huge game, but it will depend maybe on if he's put in the best position and if managed to get his confidence back. Because yesterday, yeah, he didn't feel, he didn't give the impression to be at his best, and which is not very good.
Yeah, Peter. Look, as you said at the top, it's still all to play for. Second leg still to come. And no one knows Barcelona better than Luis Enrique, really, does he?
It's quite interesting before the game that Luis Enrique talked about who embodied the Barcelona DNA more, and he said me without a doubt. And
so, yeah, so look, it's still all to play for. You said it at the top there. PSG still have to go to Barcelona, but if you're talking about Barcelona DNA, Luis Enrique embodies a lot of that. He knows that club very, very well.
Yeah, and it was quite funny before the game where you had Luis Enrique answering a question about who embodies that DNA more, and he said without a doubt it's me, and it sort of set a trap for Xavi to walk into, and he did quite well actually, Xavi, and I think this whole tie has done his profile a lot of good. I think Pierre summed it up nicely in terms of what this will mean in terms of Mbappe and what he can do. I think with Luis Enrique, we've seen throughout this season, it has been a very experimental season, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit more depth. But you could see that with the way in which he's evolved the team. So he's at the start of the season, he tried 4 forwards, and that infamously didn't work very well at St James's Park against Newcastle. We've seen Mbappe play as a 9. We've seen him play from the left, and I just think to the round of 16 tie against Real Sociedad, where in the first leg you had PSG for 45 minutes being outplayed. Real Sociedad playing on what was a clear sort of weakness in this early team, where if you press them high, particularly in their build-up, they will struggle and they will give you chances. They ship a lot of chances, and that's where, as Pierre was saying, Donnarumma has been so important because he's always that last line of defence, having to deal with a lot of shots. So even though they held a 2-0 lead, courtesy of Mbappe, pertinent timing again, considering that there was all the talk about him telling the club he's leaving, and then he puts in a performance like that where it's decisive. You had the second leg where you thought, how is this going to work? You've got your best players leaving, there's all the noise, it's March, it's the round of 16, this is the typical banana skin for PSG, the prevailing winds of trouble. But then you had a tactical tweak again. You had Ousmane Dembele playing centrally, you had him as the sort of a false 9, a 10, and completely undid Real Sociedad, made it a very comfortable tie, the most complete away performance we've seen from them. So I think, as much as I could say for the Barcelona game, there are elements of the way he set the team up that didn't really work. That's evident from a half-time change where Bradley Barcola comes on, and you had Marco Asensio as ineffective, you had the difficulties at right back, getting Mbappe shackled. He is that coach who can turn things around, and PSG know that because of Noel Manzada, of course, in 2017.
Yeah, Pierre, I mean, we just talked about Barcola, Warren, Zaire Emery. Neither of those two players started. We talk about, Enrique kind of still playing with this team at this moment in time, but the philosophy this season is young, dynamic talent. And you've got 2 of the best in France right there sitting on the bench. And we saw the difference they made when they came on. In comparison, look, Barcelona started with some young players and they stood up well. Was there a bit of a hesitance from Enrique to really push these young stars and put them in this position and, try and put faith in them to get Paris Saint-Germain the result?
It's very hard to answer because actually, it's very hard to understand the whole philosophy of Enrique. Sometimes he gives the impression to say, okay, let's play with the young, and suddenly he makes totally different decision. So I think you're totally right in the way that you say that symbolically it's terrible for Paris what happened yesterday. There is an expression, a Catalan expression that said "cantera versus cartera," which means academy versus wallet. And it's a way to say that in Barcelona, we are very proud to have our academy against Real Madrid, who have the financial power. And they can use this expression for yesterday's game because, as you said, they have very, very young player like Kubasi. I think he's 17, something like that. He was so good. And obviously, Pedri, when he arrived, he made this wonderful assist. So, and as you say, the young Parisian didn't play at the start, at the beginning of the game, and Barcola, when he arrived, he was very good. But in the same way, Zaire Emery, he made a mistakes on the goal of Christensen. He was supposed to be on Christensen on this awful goal. So, yeah, if he doesn't put actually, if he didn't put Zaire Emery, it's because these last few weeks he was not as good as he used to be. You know, he's very young, Zaire Emery, and he has to handle things very complicated. I think he's 17 and he's learning to drive. You know, he's passing his driving license. He's passing his baccalaureate. You say it in English, scholar degree, right? And
Okay.
he's also still living with his parents. I mean, there is a lot of things to deal with that he has discovered the French national team as well. So there is a lot of change for this young player, and maybe it was a bit too much for him to begin a Champions League game at this level of the competition. So in some way, I understand the decision of Luis Enrique on this.
Okay, well let's move on to the inevitable conversation, Peter. Mbappe. I mean, look, there's this incredible cloud hanging over the club at this moment in time, you know, and we've seen how Luis Enrique has dealt with him this season. Do you think he's been quite astute in what he wants to do with Mbappe this season, Peter?
I think it's been really interesting how he's dealt with Mbappe this season. I think when you frame the season as a whole, you've got the club wanting to go in a new direction. You know, we want to reset, new younger players, our complete overhaul of the squad last summer, building for the long term. You know, we talked about the Champions League and whether that's absolutely everything this year or for the long term. And then you've got Kylian Mbappe, who, of course, is going to leave in the summer. He's here for the short term, peak of his career. How does that marry up? And that's quite an interesting dynamic to manage, particularly as a head coach. I think Luis Enrique's handled him pretty well, all considered. I think back to the start of the season. Of course, he walks into a scenario where Mbappe is not on the pre-season tour. He's put up for sale because he won't renew his contract. He then reintegrates him. Mbappe does what Mbappe does, top scorer by a considerable margin.
So yeah, I mean, Dembele, he's been used in a very different way here at Paris, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's taken on a really important role for Luis Enrique this season. He is the player who's responsible for the pass before the pass. You know the expression. You know the guy through which attacks are funneled on that right hand side. And I think from a creative perspective, and I think from an output perspective, everyone looks at that with Dembele. They go goals and assists, and he's got a good number of assists this season, 13 assists. But I think they look at people criticize him for his goals. That's always been the element, isn't it? But I don't think that's not the key factor with Dembele. He scored last night against Barcelona. That's only his second goal of the season. But what we've seen is that when you look at the data, he leads on metrics such as progressive passes, progressive carries, progressive receptions as well, which just gives you an idea of the number of forward passes, number of forward movements that are going through him in this team. And I think the best example we've seen is lately how Luis Enrique has used him. Real Sociedad, the second leg, moving him into a central role, basically to get him on the ball more, to see more of the play. Against Marseille in the Classique, the same thing. And then last night, second half, the game's not going the right way. The change at halftime sees Bacola come on, play on the right-hand side, Dembele move into that central role again. And he's very much an integral part of what Luis Enrique is trying to build. But he's not necessarily, the guy who's replaced. He's not Mbappe's replacement at all. He is the guy creating for that. And it's interesting because the Dembele story has been brilliant talent, fantastic ability, unbelievable dribbler.
Yeah, and Pierre, very quickly on Mbappe as well. And look, we know the departure's imminent. Maybe it might be Real Madrid. We still don't know yet. But I'm thinking about the brand of PSG. I'm thinking about the city of Paris. I'm thinking about France. It's become a national institution. I'm thinking about Ligue 1 as well as a brand. Without Kylian Mbappe, one of the biggest global stars, in football. What does this mean for all those factors if he leaves France?
Yeah, if you want me to say that it's a global nightmare, I would say yes. And especially because, we are dealing, French Ligue 1 is dealing its TV rights right now.
Yeah.
And it's awful because they wanted to conclude before the announcements of Mbappe, hoping that maybe the TV could hope that he will stay, but now he's leaving. So the value of the rights are not good. It's very hard to negotiate in this situation. So to give you a concrete example, for the brand Ligue 1, it's not good at all. But in the end of the day, I think we all have understood he want to leave. He could have left a few years ago, and now, his behavior, it's all about frustration sometimes, anger sometimes. So we have all understood that if he would stay in Paris, it will be counterproductive. I mean, it won't be positive for him. So we are disappointed as French football fan, but we do understand the situation. And just to conclude, it's quite normal. We are used to that, because if you look at about the greatest French player, from Raymond Kopa to Michel Platini to Zinedine Zidane to Thierry Henry, they all have to leave abroad at some moment to improve. So we have to accept that.
Is this the end of the Galactico era then? The high-profile signings for PSG then, Pierre? Does it signal the last of the great ones?
That's the hope. With if Luis Enrique managed to get the power and to keep the power he has got, we can hope that. I give you a short example, because I'll be quick. But Donnarumma. Why PSG has bought Donnarumma? He has bought because it's a great name. He has been elected best player of the European Championship 2021. It's glittering, if I can say that. But is it the goalkeeper you do need? Not at all. I mean, he's not good at all with his feet, for the kind of football Luis Enrique wants, it's not at all the good goalkeeper. He's not able to play with his feet. The second goal of Barca yesterday was because he made a mistake when he tried to play with his feet. So it's typical example of, you buy a player because you are PSG and you want a name, and you don't buy the right player. So to answer your question, I hope it will be, and officially that's the official speech, the official commitment of the club. It's to say that it's over and we have understood and we change our policy. So let's see, it will be the case.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, Peter. Will PSG keep buying big name players if it isn't the case that they progress in the Champions League against Barcelona? I know we've sort of alluded to the fact that perhaps they might get a pass this year, as it's such a club in transition, but might it affect their summer transfer plans, do you reckon?
Well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Does the talk of the long term, this younger team, does that go out the window if the big name becomes available and you can pick him up and they need some other profile? We'll have to see. I think, obviously, when Mbappe, confirmed that he was leaving to his teammates and to the club, the response was, we'll have to replace the goals, and they do need to replace the goals. We've talked about that. But then you had, we've reported that Victor Osimhen was a target, and you think, well, yeah, for goals, sure, get that. But they also spent 170 million on two centre forwards last summer, Gonzalo Ramos and Randal Kolo Muani. It is that balance, and it comes back to how sustainable the long-term narrative is and the substance to it. It's a test of it. What are they going to do? When you actually look at the team, it's very young. There's a lot of talent, and particularly if you were to say Mbappe's best position is on the left, the players they will have available next season on the left are Bradley Barcola, 21 years old, has really impressed. Had a difficult game against Newcastle in the Champions League, got pilloried for it, but Luis Enrique stuck by him and has been excellent. And you've got Xavi Simons coming back from RB Leipzig, one of the most promising wingers in Europe. So in terms of his position, there are players there. There's talent there. Just depends what and how they want to do it. As Pierre was outlining, there are other areas to this squad that needs to be evolved. You've still got square pegs in round holes. Donnarumma is one. I don't think they've really replaced what Verratti would bring to this team. I feel like Verratti would be a player that would really suit what Luis Enrique wants to do. We've seen Vitinha be fantastic, really step on, take his game to another level, exactly what Luis Enrique wants in terms of possession. But as a six, he doesn't have that bite. We've seen Manu Ugarte come in last summer. But technically, is he enough? Does he have the ability? Will he improve to be a regular a number six that Luis Enrique would want? So these are more areas that I think that probably need more of a focus than necessarily just Mbappe. They need goals, of course, but it's how they do their squad building. And they have built, with the big changes they made last summer, there's a young core there. What do they do with that? Do they stick with it? Do they twist? And I think this summer will be really, really, really interesting about whether they do that or not, and also indicative of how much, say, Luis Enrique has and can maintain his position of power.
Yeah, Pierre, on that, it feels like PSG is in a place of transition. And I think about, do we maybe judge Enrique next season? This season, the minimum requirement you think is Ligue 1. Looks like it's going to be PSG's, right? So we've got that out of the way. Next season, maybe no more egos on the team. He's overseen Messi go, Neymar go, Mbappe now leaving. Maybe we can now start to see the maestro do his work.
Definitely, and that's how usually the great club used to work. You give the key to a manager you do trust, and he takes the right decision. That's how it worked in Manchester City, Liverpool, and so let's hope it will work like that. But in the complicated history of PSG, it's always a different moment, and I hope they will stick to this. I hope. But I won't be surprised that suddenly, I don't know, they try to buy Harry Kane. I don't know. No, it's not a good name, but Phil Foden. Let's say
no more headlines, Pierre. No more headlines.
Let's say Phil Foden or something. I think there is always a part of the mind of Nasser El Khelaifi who say, okay, we are PSG, we have to do something big on the market. So to answer your question, I hope so, but I have a small fear that they can make a big crazy decision this summer. Nevertheless,
is it better though for PSG that they now have a good manager? I mean, some might say underrated on the world scene. That you look at Liverpool next season, no manager. They're starting from afresh. There are certain other teams across Europe, Bayern Munich again, starting from afresh. Maybe PSG have 1 year ahead, and actually they can start building on something as opposed to starting something. Pierre.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right, but maybe I'm too pessimistic. But actually, it for example, Liverpool, we don't know exactly. We have a guess, but we don't know exactly who is going to be the next manager. But the structure of the club is very strong, And can I say that the sporting structure of PSG is strong? I'm not sure, because actually we are not sure that Campos, the sporting director, is going to stay. So there is always this question of who is the real boss? What kind of football do we want to play? Is Enrique is going to take the decision? If there is a new sporting director, he wanted to put his mark on the summer market. Will he get on well with Enrique? There is always this kind of instability potential. So I'm not so confident about it.
Okay. I just want to finish on this, and please, both of you, Peter, you and please, Pierre, follow on. In terms of how the PSG fans are connecting with this current team of young stars. We look at the discontent with Neymar. The ultras are outside his house telling him, how they felt. We look at what happened with Messi. They were very vocal and on that current regime of player or style of player. Is there a better connection now, Peter, from your perspective, with the fans, with this current team of, I guess no one really knows where they're going to go, but at least they represent something a little Parisian?
Yeah, I mean, you've summed it up well. I mean, the contrast to last year is pretty extreme, right? When PSG were picking up the winners' medals, you had Neymar and Messi, players being booed while they were collecting the Ligue 1 winners' medals, and it's like, that's not a good situation to be in. You had Galtier, who was incredibly unpopular at the end. The Marseille guys, all of that. This year, I mean, at the weekend, you had the ultras holding up a banner praising Al Khelaifi, Campos, and Luis Enrique, which that doesn't happen necessarily. I think there's always going to be that pessimism. I think Pierre's outlined that quite well. The uncertainty about what might happen, but in terms of buy-in, I think there is more, because they have Warren Zaire-Emery. There are young players they can get behind, even at full time. Just the little things, like last night, going over to the fans, calling the fans. There has been an element of rebuilding that relationship, and I think that's been helpful, because when you're trying to make such a big change in terms of personnel and structure and the wholesale project, you need your fans to come with you. And so far, that has seemingly been the case. Now, what happens post Mbappe? Let's see. But for sure, I feel like it's certainly in a different place to last year.
Yeah, Pierre, you're the man on the streets of Paris for us. Are they connecting with with this team? Zaire Emery, classic, Parisian boy, and he's a good player. French national team now, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think you sum up very well. I think the potential of Zaire Emery is very huge. I mean, on the pitch and also on a symbolic way. He could be the Phil Foden, what is for City, the Rashford for United. The guy, Trent Alexander-Arnold for Liverpool. The home ground player you are proud of, who are a symbol, who is so good, and in which you trust. I mean, in a supporter point of view. So I think, yeah, it will depend a lot of him. He's supposed to be the next star, actually, of the club. He's so good, so gifted, so talented. So it will depend a lot of him more than, for example, Barcola, because Barcola, he comes from Lyon. There is a lot of player who didn't really grow up with PSG. So yeah. But in the end of the day, you also know that in the history of PSG, there have been temptation in the past to play only with a Parisian player. It was the case in 2000 with, for example, they took Nicolas Anelka from Madrid, and they say, okay, let's play with young Parisian players that who are a good symbol of this. The capital city in France, and it didn't work at all at the time. So I hope the same mistake won't be repeated.
It's so funny. It feels like the story of PSG is optimism and pessimism balancing each other
Definitely.
out continuously. No?
It's the DNA of the club.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I tell you what, thank you so much for your time, both of you. Peter, I know you've got to rush and jump on a plane, and Pierre as well. Thanks for joining us from Paris as well. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget, Adam and the team will be back tomorrow for the weekend preview. Speak soon.